The book of Revelation, chapter 18, verses 1 to 3, chapter 19, verses 1 and 2. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living." After this, I heard what seemed to be the loud voice of a great multitude in heaven, crying out, "Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and power belong to our God, for his judgments are true and just. For he has judged the great prostitute, who corrupted the earth with her immorality, and has avenged on her the blood of his servants." The word of the Lord.
Well, the fall is here, and one of the ways that you know that fall is upon you is because Starbucks rolls out the pumpkin spice latte. And this has to be one of the all-time hits of branding after Michael Jordan's own brand, which is amazing. When I was 13 years old, I got some of the first Jordan apparel for $15,000. I'll give you a picture of me in that Jordan apparel as a 13-year-old. As a fundraiser for City on a Hill. That's what it'll cost to see that. But the pumpkin spice latte, I remember when it came out, it is an IV of sugar and nutmeg and cinnamon. And it is here because I opened up my app for Starbucks and saw it. But you may not know that nutmeg has a pivotal role to play in the history of New York City. In fact, nutmeg has such a great role to play in the history of New York City. You're going to be amazed when I tell you what it is. New York City would not be what it is today were it not for nutmeg. And you're thinking he's crazy. He must be exaggerating. But I'm not exaggerating. And why is that? Nutmeg, do you know where it comes from? It does not come from Connecticut. Nutmeg first came from the island of Run, spelled like Run, R-U-N. The island of Run is a very small island off the coast of Indonesia. And nutmeg was literally worth its weight in gold in Europe in the 17th century, the early 1600s. It was thought to ward off the plague. It was thought to be good for your health. And we should remember, in an era of no refrigeration, spices were key to making food palatable. Nutmeg was found in the island of Run off the coast of Indonesia. And the British and the Dutch were vying for control of these islands. And the British took control of the island of Run in the early part of the 17th century, around 1616. Meanwhile, the Dutch had taken control of New Amsterdam and the American colonies. And as the Dutch and the English were vying for control over the imperial trade routes in the 17th century, they fought numerous places and numerous times in numerous ways. I won't bore you with all the details. But they came to settle on a treaty. And in the latter part of the 17th century, the Dutch and the English signed a treaty. I believe it's called the Treaty of Breda. And they made what is now considered to be one of the all-time worst deals in the history of trading. The Dutch gave Manhattan, New Amsterdam, to the English. And the English gave the island of Run to the Dutch. And the Dutch East India Company was thrilled because now they could have a monopoly, they thought, on nutmeg. And what did the British get? The British got a muddy little island that was really only good for trading beaver pelts. And of course, what ended up happening? Manhattan became the financial capital of the world. What happened to Run? Run is still there. Run is still a great site for organic nutmeg and producing a lot of it. It's still famous for nutmeg. But the cultivation of nutmeg made its way out of Run into the mainland of Indonesia and elsewhere, especially in the Caribbean now. You can also find nutmeg. One of the greatest all-time worst trading deals in retrospect. But at the time, it looked like a great deal for the Dutch East India Company, because beaver pelts were nothing in comparison to nutmeg. So now you see, were it not for nutmeg, you could be speaking Dutch right now. That's how important nutmeg is to where we are today. And yeah, it looks like a really bad deal, but that's only in retrospect. That's only in retrospect that it looks like a bad deal. At the time, it seemed like a great idea. And the point to take away from this is that's the way a lot of things are in life. We don't get a do-over with major decisions. Decisions come upon us. They have to be made. We never have perfect information. We never know exactly how everything is going to turn out. If the Dutch had known that Manhattan was going to become the financial capital of the world, surely they would have decided differently. But there is a way in which we do have access to information about the future. It's not the most specific kind of information about every single decision that we make. But God has given us revelation, literally the book of Revelation in this case, which is called the Revelation of Jesus Christ, to reveal to us certain foundational things about the world in which we live, to reveal to us certain foundational truths about the future that awaits us all, to reveal to us wisdom to keep us from making certain decisions that could shipwreck our lives or cause us great pain. There is a perspective given to us from heaven. And as this passage opens up, John, getting a vision from heaven, says this in verse 1 of chapter 18. He says, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And when he says that the earth was made bright with his glory, it's poetic imagery here. You can imagine the whole earth just all of a sudden becoming vivid. And brightness and vividness are essential for human productivity. I saw something rather terrifying in an article I was reading recently. It said there's a factory in China where there is no light. It's all dark in this very productive factory. And the reason it's all dark is no human beings work in the factory. It's all robots. And robots don't need light, but people need light. We need brightness. We need vividness. We need this to be productive, flourishing humans. And this is imagery that this light comes to us from heaven. This light from heaven gives us perspective. Left in darkness, we make bad deals for ourselves and others. But with this heavenly perspective, we can see clearly. And there are certain things we can choose to do and certain things we can choose to avoid. And this light from heaven comes from this angel and makes this announcement. In verse 2, the angel says, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. What is Babylon the Great? Well, the book of Revelation is given toward the end of the first century to encourage the early Christian church who was suffering under oppression from the Roman Empire. They were being persecuted for their faith. Persecuted in very specific ways for very specific things. For example, these churches that were in Asia Minor that are addressed in the first part of the book of Revelation, many of them worked in towns in order to participate in the local trade guilds you would have to offer incense to Caesar or to some other patron deity of that particular trade. And if you didn't do it, you could lose your job and lose your livelihood. Other early Christians were literally burned at the stake for their faith because they refused to renounce their faith in Jesus Christ. There was a lot of suffering happening. The Apostle John himself is the only disciple to die a natural death, but even his death is somewhat unnatural in the sense that he was exiled to the island of Patmos where he received this vision. So he himself is suffering. And Jesus gives his church this revelation of himself to encourage them, to know that if they trust him and walk with him, their future will indeed be secure, to know that there will come a time when this suffering will end and he will bring about ultimate justice. And the archetype of Babylon comes out several times in the book of Revelation, but then it comes to kind of a high point in Revelation 17 to 19. Babylon was the ancient kingdom that sacked Jerusalem, destroyed the Jerusalem temple, and took God's people into exile. They took the people of God into Babylon. And Babylon becomes synonymous with power, luxury, wealth, and idolatry in the Bible. And what Babylon comes to represent is, according to G.K. Bill, who summarizes it well, he says, Babylon was the ungodly world power under which Israel had to live in captivity. When they remained loyal to their God, they underwent trial by their oppressors. You see that in the book of Daniel, for example. The ungodly social, political, and economic system dominated by the Roman Empire placed believers in the same position as Israel was under Babylon. Just as Babylon destroyed the first temple and sent Israel into exile, so Rome came to be called Babylon. And even in other first century and later Jewish writings, Jews, non-Christian Jews, will refer to Rome as Babylon, seeing this parallel. Therefore, here in the Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, Rome and all wicked world systems take on the symbolic name Babylon the Great. And G.K. Bill is one of the leading scholars on the book of Revelation in the world. And he emphasizes that Babylon isn't referring to literal Babylon here, but it's referring to this world system, a world system that is manifest time and time again. It is a world system that, when we see it in operation, is dominated more by lust and indulgence than it is by love and sacrifice. And that's why this sermon is called A Tale of Two Cities, a city of lust or a city of love, a city of indulgence or a city of gracious sacrifice. These two ways of living run through the human heart. These two ways of living run through every town and every nation and every part of the world. It is a tension that is residing within us all. It is a tension that is especially magnified in cities because commerce and industry and people are magnified in the city. And so therefore you see writ large this tension. I was reading a great commentary by a friend on Substack, and she said New York City is both disgusting and glorious at the same time, and went on to reflect upon different ways you can encounter New York. And some things you can find disgusting or heartbreaking. Other things are glorious and amazing. And every global city is like that. And City on a Hill, why are we called City on a Hill? We're called City on a Hill because God intends the church to be a city within the city, to be a place where you can find life and love and grace and renewal. God intends the church to be a city on a hill, a place of refuge and nurture that can do things for you that New York City cannot do for you. We are excited to be in New York. I'm excited that you're in New York. I'm glad to be in New York. And I love all the wonderful things that happen in this city. It is a place of tremendous opportunity. It is a place of realizing potential. And we're all for that. And God is all for that. God's common grace is abounding in New York City, not just among Christians, but among those who do not consider themselves Christians as well. But in order to prosper and thrive to the greatest degree, we indeed do need to be aware of this tension that runs within us and therefore works out of us into the institutions where we live, work, and play. And that is this tension between lust and love. I want to read you some famous quotations about lust and love, especially describing the lust of the human heart. This first one is from Augustine, the 4th century Christian theologian, 4th and 5th century Christian theologian, who wrote a famous treatise called The City of God. And in The City of God, Augustine outlines what became a paradigm of two cities. The city of man on the one hand and the city of God on the other hand. And the two are overlapping. He writes, accordingly, two cities have been formed by two loves. The earthly by the love of self, even to the contempt of God. The heavenly by the love of God, even to the contempt of self. The former, in a word, glories in itself. The latter in the Lord. For the one seeks glory from men, but the greatest glory of the other is God. The witness of conscience. The one lifts up its head in glory to its own glory. The other says to its God, Thou art my glory, and the lifter up of mine head. In the one, the lust of domination dominates both its princes and the nations it subjugates. In the other, both leaders and followers serve one another in love. It's a powerful, famous quotation that sets the trajectory of much Western political theory and political ethics. And you see there how Augustine sees these two roots of two overlapping societies. And the reality of it is, these two roots of lust and love, they actually take root in our own lives. There's another powerful quote, much shorter one, from Pope Gregory the Great from the 6th century. He's the one who formalized the 7 deadly sins, and lust is one of the 7 deadly sins. And he writes this in Moralia on Job. From lust arise blindness of mind, thoughtlessness, inconstancy, precipitancy, love of self, hatred of God, attachment to the present life, and horror of the world to come. A blindness, a thoughtlessness, an inconsistency. When we're speaking about lust this morning, we're not just speaking about sexual lust, we're speaking about this unchained desire of the human heart, which will seek to feed itself to the exclusion and at the expense and even at the abuse of others. And this is why it is good news. It is good news for John and good news for the early church to hear, fallen is Babylon the Great. It is a proclamation that lust, domination, and subjugation will not have the last word in human history over the human race. And then as this text unfolds, there's a description of what it looks like when lust does have this domination. And it's a description that is presented to us so we can identify it and also we can turn away from it and toward Christ himself. And the first bit of that description comes in verses 2 and 3. We read, Babylon the Great has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. This language is referring to a religious system. It's a religious system. You can see that because he speaks of, the angel speaks of demons. This is about the spiritual life. And unclean spirit, unclean bird, unclean beast. With Jewish background, referencing back to uncleanness, when God, among the old covenant people, had declared certain things clean and certain things unclean, as a way to remind them to be consecrated to himself. And this lust in the sphere of religion is called out here. True religion points us to Jesus Christ and to God himself, who enables us to love God and neighbor. False religion is a human projection to prop up our own desires, to prop up our own social or political agendas. True religion must have power to save. False religion says save yourself or trust in some other entity to save you. True religion must have power to bless. True religion must have power to resist deceit. This is why true religion in the Christian faith is not even so much true religion as it is true relationship. Because it's only through this relationship with Jesus Christ, who gives us the power of his own resurrection, that we can be set free from the bondage to our own lust and our own desires. It's only through this relationship with Jesus that we are saved, that we are given a new heart that can be more animated by love than it is by our own self-preservation. Jesus said in the Gospel of John, I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And what Jesus is getting at there is true religion is relationship with me, 100% dependent upon me. That's a strong call on the one hand, but it's a call that's full of grace and mercy and forgiveness. Why is it such good news? Because Jesus doesn't say, come to me dressed up and perfect. Jesus says, come to me if you are weary and heavy laden. Come to me with your shame. Come to me with your guilt. Come to me with your anxiety. He wants us to come to him right as we are, and he has open arms for us. This is why it's good news that Jesus says, come to me. I am the vine. I'm the vine. Come abide in me and be a branch, and you'll bear fruit. So you see that Babylon the Great perpetuates, the city of man perpetuates a false kind of religion which casts us back upon ourselves rather than pointing us to Jesus. And there's no grace in that. There's no hope in that. There's no mercy in that. There's no joy in that. But Jesus gives all of that to us. And the second thing we see here is relationships. The city of God and this working out of lust in relationships. Verse 3, for all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. Babylon the Great is presented in chapter 17 as a prostitute. Now, when we think of prostitution, we rightly think of trafficking and oppression and the abuse of women. That is exactly what we should think. It's predominant among us. It's not quite the image that's being used here, though. This is an image of prostitution where Babylon, as the great prostitute, is not the one being oppressed. Babylon is all-powerful, doing the oppressing, doing the seducing, exercising influence at a cosmic scale. So we need to have that clarity as we hear this particular image. And this idea of provoking us as people to prioritize lust over love in its sexual expression. Now, sexual intimacy is created by God. It's to be enjoyed as God gave it to us. It's a good thing. But God intends sexual intimacy to be protected by covenant and commitment so that it doesn't sting when it's over. And we live in a culture that says you're no more than your sexual fulfillment, that your identity is no greater than your sexual identity. It's really frontline for us. But Jesus proves otherwise by his own life. Jesus himself, celibate, unmarried, the image of God and man in perfect embodiment, going through life single and unmarried. He proves that sexual identity is not the ultimate thing for us. And more than that, he offers grace and healing for those who've been stung by sexual intimacy gone wrong. And that needs to be said so loudly. Sometimes the Christian church is not given that impression or that message explicitly, but the Bible itself gives it multifold, that Jesus provides grace and redemption and a fresh start and healing for those who have been stung by sexual intimacy gone wrong. We also see here this lust in the realm of politics. Kings of the earth have committed immorality with her. Here we see lust among those in power, and this is on display all the time, right before our eyes. When political leaders use their power, capitalizing on the world system and animated by the same world system, Babylon the Great, for their own means and their own exaltation. Now, Jesus reigns over all. Jesus is the cosmic ruler, and he will one day deal with every unjust and lust-infused leader. He will one day judge every nation. Government is a temporary provision, while Jesus advances his kingdom of blessing all throughout the earth. Government's just a temporary provision. It's an important one that we should care about. And yet it has no power to save us. And government especially goes wrong when it becomes our only hope. It's important. It's very important. We should do our civic duty. And the Christian Western political tradition has emphasized the separation of powers within particular governments to check the lust of the human heart. So that's why in our particular system we have 3 branches of government. The Christian political tradition typically has emphasized the value of some type of a free market. But regardless of your political system or your economic system, the system itself will never be enough to check the lust of the human heart. A free market system filled with lust and greed, with no love for neighbor, with no charity of spirit, with no corporate responsibility, corporate in the sense of corporations, with no sense of stewardship for those with great wealth to care for others, it will devolve into seeing people as no more than the product of their labor or the potential for their labor, which is incredibly dehumanizing and millennia and infinity apart from what it is to be created in the image of God. Politics and commerce. Commerce is next. I just mentioned commerce. The merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. Seduced by lust, there's no care for the prospering or welfare of others. Just get all that we can. No matter what your political or economic system is, it will never be sufficient to check the lust of the human heart. Only Jesus is powerful enough to do this. It's by God's design that the city of God will be overlapping and interweaving within the city of man. Through New York City, through Paris, through London, through Los Angeles, through Chicago, through every global city, and through every small town around the world. It's the plan of God that little churches and big churches, communities of grace, would be cities on a hill, cities within a city. Judgment. Well, that's a rich question.